Welcome, everyone, to our brand new podcast called Getting Deep with a PhD and a JD.
You may be asking, what is this podcast about? This podcast is a spirited and analytical discussion about relevant news topics that are not a part of your daily timeline. Not only will you learn something new, you will be inspired to action. So here's my question. What age-old institution is everyone expected to participate in, but most people don't see it as a priority for living a fulfilling life?
Marriage.
Ah!
Am I right?
You are correct. You are correct. It's interesting because when people are asked about what do they see as a priority for living a fulfilling life, about 73% of folks talk about their having a successful and fulfilling job and career, whereas only 23% mention marriage as being a priority for living a fulfilling life.
Wow. I guess I can say that I'm surprised a little bit, but then I'm also not surprised just because of everyday life and what I see going on in everyday life. That that the traditional marriage, the traditional institution of marriage is no longer. I don't know if it started with the increase of the incidences of divorce. Personally, I think it's because women began working.
Mhm.
And I personally feel like women, since they, were able to take care of themselves financially, they didn't need to maintain marriages that didn't work, marriages that were maybe abusive,
Mhm.
or just didn't. They just weren't interested in doing that.
Yeah.
So no more are they required to get married for their lower level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I love that, Maslow.
I know you do.
We no longer need marriage for meeting our basic needs anymore. And as a matter of fact, I think one of the discussions that you and I had about marriage, and one of the things that was kind of surprising to me, though, was that, except when you think about it, though, was that married men live longer, have more fulfilled lives than married women.
Right.
And vice versa. Single women have longer and more fulfilled lives than single men. So actually, marriage benefits men more than
lot
women.
more.
I'm not saying that it doesn't benefit both at some point in time or in some way or different ways, however you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But just if we're talking about in general terms. And so I said, well, yeah, I mean, if you do think about it, a lot of men benefit from marriage or the traditional idea of marriage in this day and time because women are expected to work and contribute financially to the household while still maintaining all of their traditional roles in the household.
Yeah.
And don't throw in some children. They're taking care of the
Throw
children.
them in.
They're taking care of the children. They're doing all of the housework or majority of the housework. Like they're required to still maintain all of those traditional responsibilities in addition to taking on some of the men's responsibility, which is going out working.
Well, and also I think that, first of all, I think we should let our listeners and viewers know that we're really talking about heterosexual marriage.
Yes.
I think that we could also extend our discussion to folks who are in the LGBT community.
Mhm.
But what we want to do today is talk about a specific type of marriage, and then perhaps we'll talk about other types in future episodes, but today we want to do the heterosexual marriage. And also because there's a lot more research that's
Research
been
and
done.
data. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kimmy, I think in order to really talk about marriage, I think we need to talk about the original intent of marriage, because the original intent was to fulfill certain needs, and it was based on how folks were living in a very specific time. And now the world has changed. Like, marriage was initially not a love relationship.
Oh, yeah.
It was about combining families.
Yes.
It really was about combining families. And the reason people wanted to combine families is because you wanted to be able to have develop and build wealth and have
Yes.
resources. And
Yes.
so people made these relationships. And when I say made these relationships, because people really did
Make them.
make partnerships,
Yeah.
and they had families connected to other families. And the idea of having a love relationship is really a relatively newer
New concept?
occurrence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and there's still places in the world where a love marriage is still seen as being not the norm, and more the still marrying the families and connecting the families. And
then bringing children
exactly
into that family to
right.
continue the wealth building.
The wealth building, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's that wealth building. And the other piece that I think is really important is that the gender roles, marriages were very gendered because people knew exactly their quote role. And women were raised to do certain roles and men were raised to do certain roles.
Right.
And that was during a time when women didn't have options. And one of the things, and this, I think the important piece for women is being able to control our fertility. I think that has really changed the whole idea of partnering, because now women have the ability to say when and if they're going to have children. And that really changed marriage, because then women didn't have to have 12 children if they didn't want to have 12 children.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things that we talked about as well was the idea that what was it? Let me take a look at my note here. The idea of having outside interests. And and that's something that I never thought about either. So when you think about when you think about the traditional idea of marriage, as well as what marriage kind of looks like now for those who do choose to get married, is the woman's focus is inside the household.
Yes.
While the man's focus is outside. And because the woman then and even now is still tasked with maintaining the internal workings of the house, she doesn't have the option of pursuing outside interests, pursuing her own hobbies. So she's less happy. I mean, because when you think about it, we're both humans. We both have brains that carry with it intelligence and to seek out intrinsic value, right, to ourselves.
Yeah.
And just being in the house and not doing anything else is just not fulfilling. And so I never thought about it that way. But once again, when you do think about it that way, it makes total sense.
And also, when you think about marriages that happen, there's this period of time when people become empty nesters. And when you look at the research really talks about how if women have been in these marriages and their focus has really been on their children and on their spouse, then when the children leave, sometimes women have a very hard time figuring out, okay, well, who am I outside of being a wife and being a mother? And that can be really, really dizzying or really
Jarring.
disorienting and
Yeah,
jarring.
disorienting. Yeah.
Yeah, disorienting because society still has messages, even though there's certain places where women are allowed to be in terms of the workforce. There's certain spheres where women are seen more often. We see women who have advanced degrees. We see women running companies. We see women who are attorneys and
Mm-hmm.
doctors and,
Mm-hmm.
and doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's still the expectation that women will still take care of the house.
Yeah.
And so even if you have a woman who is working and who's able to provide for herself, there's still that expectation that women will know how to take care of a home and that women will provide the emotional labor within the household. And that's the other piece. And when so I've read some different articles about marriages that are not successful. And one of the things that they talked about how women have a disproportionate amount, we already know, of the household work.
Yeah.
And if they have children, the child rearing.
Mm.
But this whole idea of women having a disproportionate amount of the emotional labor
Yeah.
is something that also
For the marriage itself,
leads
you mean?
to, yes, for like the woman being the one to keep the friendships going. Like if they have couple friends or friends, setting up different social events for the family, kind of keeping the family, keeping the
Engage.
emotional baggage. Like if people get upset, trying to negotiate and being the peacekeeper and trying to use a lot of the emotional expense. So that's one reason that marriage can be seen as being more taxing. And that's also the reason that more like men tend to benefit more from being married than women do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because they don't see it that way.
Right.
And then women see it the other way.
Yeah.
And so that, so just learning that statistic was very interesting to me. So I kind of want to get into some of the legal components of this, right? So, we talk about that there's a declining interest in pursuing the idea of a traditional marriage relationship. I think when women went to work and they began to actualize their own interests, satisfy their own intrinsic needs and values and things like that, we began to see an increase in marriages not staying together.
Mm-hmm.
Those traditional and these were marriages that were entered into from a more traditional perspective. We're talking about our parents' generation.
Right. Right.
Obviously they started the trend of the increase in divorces, and then of course
Mm-hmm.
our generation just carried the
Blew
baton.
it
We definitely carried the baton.
up.
And so I think and so it's kind of a couple of things. So with the advent of the internet and access, I think people began to look at marriage in a different way because they were exposed to different things, exposed to a wider variety of people,
Mm-hmm.
options. People are saying, hey, I don't have to put up with this. I can just go do something else because I'm
Right.
not going to have to worry about, taking care of myself because I'm actually working. And once again, we're talking about individuals who are outside of the gender norms. They're becoming not so much norms anymore, but back then. And so, they had options, and so that also contributed to the increase of divorces, the occurrence of divorces. And then I think people saw that and saw the legal ramifications and how it impacted everyone involved, including the children involved in those relationships, the battles that take place in a court, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
okay, who's gonna have the children, who's gonna keep the children, have
Yeah.
custody, and then the division of the assets. It can be very adversarial. and most divorces are adversarial, where people are kind of going back and forth on separating the assets, separating the identity. And
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about separating the identity, usually that affects the woman, right? Because the woman
Right.
usually takes
Right.
the last name
Exactly.
of their
Exactly.
husband. So if they entered into the workforce married, some women may want to continue with that
To
name
keep
because
them,
they've
yeah.
established they've established their reputation with that name. So there's all these things, and I think uh, when we come into the 2010s and 2020s, people look at that as a huge negative, and they don't even want to enter into that situation with that in mind. So I think a lot of people look at the fallout from
Mm-hmm.
divorce and how the law views certain things. Some people feel that that there isn't a balance, and now we're starting to see more women paying spousal support.
We are.
And so that's kind of an interesting thing. We don't really know how to take it. And I think that also, if you are a woman who focused on your career and you've built your own assets, now women are saying, "Oh, I don't know if I want to get married because what's mine is mine." And
Yeah.
and
Or they're saying, we're gonna have a
or
prenuptial
prenup. Yeah,
agreement.
exactly.
And I'm also seeing that there are men who are getting custody of children in
Hmm.
divorces.
Hmm.
And you know, it's interesting to me because we still have the stereotype that if a woman doesn't get custody, there must be something really bad.
Right.
Like the woman must be, you know, really on every drug, have
Yeah.
committed every crime, you know. I mean,
And
it's
she's just the worst
and
mom.
she is the worst human being.
Hmm.
And the truth is there are situations where men really want to be the primary caregiver and
Hmm.
caretaker for their children,
Yeah. Hmm.
and women don't. There's some
Hmm.
women who don't, and we have to acknowledge that there are different kinds of contributions that people have,
Hmm.
and different things that they want to do.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
I think it's also important to mention that 69% of the divorces in marriage are initiated by women.
Yes, yes, we did
And
that.
I think that's very interesting because women when you think about the changes that occur, like if a couple is married and then they divorce, there usually are more changes that occur for women because we still
Mhm.
have women making less money than men. And
Yeah, yeah.
so chances are you'll see women have a drop in their um, quality of life in terms of money.
Mhm.
And yet 69% of women are the ones initiating divorce.
I think that goes to show how important it is to be your individual self, and how satisfying that is to be able to live on your own, be responsible for yourself, and not have the responsibilities associated with being in that marriage, because it's a lot. And I think that was the trouble with marriage to begin with, is maintaining a home is a lot of work.
Yeah,
And and it wasn't valued in the way that it should have been valued.
right, right.
And I think that because women were the majority of humans who were assigned that role, yeah, I mean, it's almost like your peace is worth more than the dollars that come along with staying in that marriage.
And that's what the research says. The research says that um, at one time, women stayed in relationships because the alternative was worse. They knew that they would not be able to take care of themselves, maybe their
Their basic needs.
children, their basic needs,
Hmm.
and their identity was really wrapped up into their spouse. But now women realize that it's not worth the additional stressors to stay in relationships that that are not fulfilling and that aren't working. And low quality marriages, this is the interesting thing. If a woman is in a high quality marriage, it benefits her health. Her health receives a boost. But if women are not in high quality marriages, then they don't receive the benefits of marriage. Whereas men receive health benefits just by being married, just by being a married man. And if you think about it and how the expectation for women, it's almost like when men get married, they automatically have, if they're in a traditional marriage, they have a cook, a housekeeper, a little sexy person.
Exactly.
And so they have all of these, a therapist, because they're emotional support. So they have all of these roles. And whereas women are raised to be the givers. And to give all of these things. And so it makes sense. And now we know that research supports that married men do tend to live longer and have better quality of life than single men.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is, we hear the banter and we hear the discussion about how, marriages lasted so long, and people characterize it as a good thing. And now you can wonder, well, was it really for all? I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule or whatever, and everybody has different experiences.
Right.
But generally speaking, it was just because the marriage, like your grandparents, just because they could say they were married for 50 and 60 years, it's like, okay, but was it a quality life, especially for the woman involved in that traditional marriage? What quality of life did she have in that traditional marriage that lasted 50 and 60 years? Or was she just in that marriage because there was no other option?
There was a sacrifice. There's people like if you speak to younger folks and you ask them about about sacrificing for marriage, specifically marriage, that belief is not as strong as if you ask a person maybe 65 or older. 65 or older, they'll talk about sacrificing for the relationship, sacrificing for the children, sacrificing to keep, the family together. Whereas folks today have other choices that can really bring value and meaning to their lives that maybe folks in past generations didn't have. And so marriage, I'm not going to say marriage is not important to younger folks, but marriage, if they're going to have a marriage, they want a good quality marriage. They're not willing to just depend. They're not willing to just get married and remain in an unhappy situation.
So
tell me something good. Are we going to sing it? Are we going to do that?
Let's try. I don't know if we're on a delay. So let's see if we're on a delay, okay? I'm going to count it down. Okay. So in 3, 2, 1.
Tell me something good.
Yeah.
We are on a delay, and it's okay. It's okay.
So, so the tell me something good, I think, is I think that we're entering or already in this phase of people just living their lives the way they want to live it and not be subjugated to a specific role. This idea of you have to do this and you have to do it this way.
Right.
I think people are able to now satisfy those intrinsic needs that they have, depending upon how, however they want to do it. If you want to do a traditional relationship, that's fabulous.
Right.
And I think that we learn from the past, and we learn different ways to even effectuate a traditional marriage the right way, right? If you're going to be, and then also you can have a traditional marriage that's topsy turvy, right?
Hmm.
Where the man is at home and the woman is out
Is
working.
out working.
But there's
Yes.
mutual respect. There's no like, oh, I'm the dominant one and you are the superior, the inferior one.
Right.
It's more of, you are a person who is contributing to our well-being as much as I'm contributing to our well-being,
Hmm.
and we make sure that each party is benefiting
Right.
in some form or fashion.
And I think, and I know that we are talking about heterosexual
Hmm.
marriage. I think that the tell me something good is that we do have marriage for same sex
Hmm.
individuals. Um, and I think that really, to me, it elevates marriage because it says that it values differences and different folks being able to form these unions. So that's really important for me. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also excited that people are just like you said, people are just making their choices about what kinds of relationships they want and making choices as to whether they want to be married or not. And we didn't even talk about children that much because,
Yeah.
there are marriages where people have children. There are marriages where people don't have children. There are marriages with blended families where one person comes in with children already and the other person comes in with children and so and marriages among different racial groups, among different religious groups. I think it's just important to really support folks in their quest to find, relationships that work
That work.
for
Hmm.
them. Yeah, and that work for
There's
them.
so many different varieties now of relationships that people involve themselves in. And there's one thing that I did forget to mention in that, it's when you talk about the LGBTQ plus community and how they are able to take advantage of, because remember, the law is slow to catch up, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So laws are still beneficial for people to be married. The
right.
tax rates are are better if you are, a married person
Married.
filing
Yep.
jointly. Um,
And if you have kids, because you can do,
yeah,
yeah,
if you
yeah.
have children, access to, to be able to be there for the person who is the love of your life, the person who you decided to partner your life with. There are certain benefits of access and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and also property.
Right,
So
right.
if you're with this person, for 20, 30 years, and something happens to one of them, and you don't want to end up in a situation where you have to get out of the house, or because you don't have any sort of rights associated with it. So we do have to remember that, like, that's,
Yeah.
and so I think that's part of the tell me something good, because yes, we are now starting to recognize that, different strokes for different folks, and everyone should be able to benefit from what they choose and who they choose to
Mm-hmm.
share their life with. And
Absolutely.
I definitely think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, so what would be our call to action? Call to action.
Call to action. I think our call to action is really, I think there's a legal call to action in making sure that we have laws that are fair and that really support the fact that different people can do different roles within the marriage, So, in other words, for us to really look at our laws and make sure that those laws don't benefit um, the quote, make sure they don't only benefit, quote, people in
Mhm.
traditional relationships, you
So
know?
continue the fight.
Exactly.
Continue the fight.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
with the way our politics are, trying to, tug back, right? And so we have to always, we're always telling you here at Getting Deep with a PhD and JD is to remain vigilant, remain knowledgeable of what's going on in your community, what policies are being considered in your community, and maintain that awareness and vigilance. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say another call to action would be um, good communication. Communicate with the person that you want to be with,
Right.
and communicate about how, and be very intentional about how you want your lives to look, and
Absolutely.
how that experience is going to be. So I think that's important, and I think that's important for young people to know. They already know because they already do it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
They
it's very
already buck the system. So
exactly. I mean, it's just younger people are really, and we've said this in other episodes, how they are
Mhm,
really embracing themselves and their authentic selves. And I
mhm.
think that that is really important, to really, really understand who you are and what you need out of a partner, and
Yes.
also not feeling like you have to change who you are in order to be with a partner. I think the younger generations really worked on that a lot more
And
than
releasing that stigma,
and
like
releasing the
getting
stigma.
that
Yeah,
stigma off of there, like for women who don't want to have children, releasing that stigma associated with not having children,
right.
are not falling in line with the standard gender roles, both men and women. For the
Absolutely.
men who do want to be home and who do want to take care of the children, who want to be in that position, to release the stigma associated with that. Because as long as it works for yourself and the person that you are intertwined with, that's really all that
That's what
matters.
that's what matters. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what matters. And so our question about, everyone's expected to participate in it, but most people don't see it as a priority for living a fulfilling life. I think, ending and going back to that and really changing that a little bit and saying it's an age-old institution and people should be able to participate in it if they would like to, and they should be able to decide how they participate in it. And they should decide, what how that would connect to them in terms of a fulfilling life. So being able to make those choices, I think is important. Yeah.
Good. I think that's a good ending note.
Yes, I do too. I do too.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
that is it for this episode. I hope you all are enjoying the topics that we're talking about.
Yes, yes.
As usual, make sure you like and
Like and
subscribe,
subscribe. Like
and
and subscribe.
comment all the things. And for now, bye for now.
Yes. Have a fabulous time. Bye for now.